What's up guys, this is Chris here, and today we're going to be talking about these guys. We're going to be going over some of the reasons that you might actually want a revolver in 2022. I know that's hard to believe considering most people think that they're irrelevant or they're obsolete, but I don't think so. And I actually think there's quite a few reasons why you might want one of these big guys, or maybe one of these guys, this year. Now before we get into the video, I do want to thank everybody who watches the videos over and over again. I appreciate your viewership, and if you love the videos, make sure to go down and subscribe. Also, when you subscribe, hit that notification bell. And I wanted to mention my Patreon supporters, of course. Thank you guys for sponsoring the video. If you want to join the Patreon squad, that's the best way to help the channel. Just go to the link in the description. Also in that description is a link to a local shelter in Ames, Iowa. It's the YSS. They could use your help. So please go down there and donate a couple of dollars. Now let's get into the video here and let's talk about some of the pros and cons of these old guys. Wheel guns. They've been around for a long time, but they've also been working for a long time, and I think a lot of people forget that. Yes, there are some serious pros to semi-automatic handguns, but these are still more than relevant, and we're gonna get into those reasons right after I explain to you what a revolver is and sort of what you would use it for. So first off, a revolver is a firearm with a rotating cylinder that you can hand thumb rounds into that work on a double action design or a double single action design, generally speaking. The chamber is in the top where the barrel is, but occasionally on the Chiappa Rhino they're in the bottom as well, which would have you change your grip just a little bit. And I think a lot of the pros and cons in this are in the actual system itself. So the first thing I really wanted to go over is even a moron can use one. Basically just, if you don't have time to load a full cylinder, and I have never trained this by the way, you just pop a few off, dump them out, hit that one at like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, slam that guy in, pop it out, slam that guy in, pop it out.
I have never loaded a revolver on my own.
I know.
Why don't you tell me what I'm doing?
Because I don't want to tell you, I want to see if it's intuitive.
It's not. Oh,
maybe it is. If you have no experience with a handgun whatsoever or a pistol or anything like that, there's a good chance you've seen a movie where a pistol or a handgun has been in. And because revolver use is so simple, you can actually see somebody do it and do it yourself. Now there's a big difference between knowing how to do something and actually being able to do it, but the simplicity of actually using a revolver helps out a lot with that. Basically, you have a button that you have to hit and push a cylinder out. And on this Ruger, you just simply push the button in, push the cylinder out. Easy breezy, right? Doesn't require a lot of hand strength, doesn't require a lot of complicated knowledge. You just simply push a button in and pull the cylinder out. Once the cylinder is out, you just thumb rounds into the gun. Easy, just like you've seen in every Western or every, LA Confidential or any movie you've ever seen. Close the cylinder, and it's literally just a manner of pulling the trigger. When people talk about using a handgun, they generally talk about just loading it and pulling the trigger. That is literally all you have to do with a revolver. So if you have somebody with no experience with a handgun or a pistol whatsoever, there's a pretty good chance that they get the concept behind loading a revolver. Now there is certainly some technique to it, like how you hold it, how you thumb the rounds in, how to make it faster, how to pull the trigger better. There's a lot of learning curve to a revolver, but the reality is the simplicity of it gets people into a firearm that otherwise wouldn't be into a firearm. And you just want to get something that's easy to use right away. A revolver is a really good entry for that. Along with that, because they're so simple, they're very mechanically reliable. There's not a lot to go wrong with them. You simply have a hammer, you have a cylinder, and you have a trigger. There's a lot of mechanical stuff that goes on in here that you usually don't have to worry about until something breaks. And they're mechanically speaking, as long as you pull the trigger, the hammer will fall, it will hit the firing pin, and the round will go off. That being said, I did want to mention that there is some user-induced malfunctions that can happen with a revolver, including short stroking the cylinder and trying to pull it again and missing cylinders. Short stroking the trigger, you have to let it come out all the way.
Yep.
This is what I expected actually. Now you have some that have live cylinders and some don't. Along with using the trigger incorrectly. And what I mean by that is pulling the trigger to the rear without keeping the sights on target and making you miss. But those are things you can work on. Technically speaking, mechanically wise, the revolver is very reliable. Now, one of the things I really like, especially about concealed carry revolvers, is not necessarily this, but using it in close quarters. Most fights are fights. Now keep that in mind. And when we're talking about a concealed carry situation, generally those things happen in close quarters. And the reason why they do is because that person wants something from you. They want to get close to you, and they want a particular thing from you, whether they want your surrender, they want your stuff, whatever it's gonna be. Those people are generally gonna be relatively close to you, and you're gonna have a little bit of time. So you're gonna have to get your carry gun out of wherever you've concealed it, and then you're gonna have to get it in operation. And the revolver really shines in that category. Partly because if there's a grappling situation, if there's a fight on the ground, if there's an entanglement of any kind, which there is in many circumstances, a semi-automatic pistol can actually get the slide caught in your clothing. And I've talked about that before, and you can actually simulate that with combatives, either submission wrestling or jiu-jitsu with firearms. And if you start rolling around on the ground and trying to actually get somebody with a simulated gun, you start to realize pretty quick that you run into a lot of malfunctions with semi-automatic pistols that you wouldn't run into with a revolver. You can actually take a revolver inside your pocket, and you can continue to fire rounds inside your pocket, which is something you are not going to be able to do with a semi-automatic pistol. The one video that comes to mind that I absolutely love is Paul Harrell's video where he shoots a revolver underneath a bed sheet, and it's so funny to watch the semi-automatic pistol malfunction but the revolver succeed. And I know that is obviously not the most likely situation you'll ever be in, but keep in mind the mechanics of a revolver and how simple and durable they are in many different circumstances, including being in an entanglement or being underneath a garment or potentially a bed sheet. Now, another super cool thing that I like about big old wheel guns is they use a variety of ammunition reliably. Semi-automatic pistol has a recoil spring, and because of that, it has a certain allowance for the power of the round that the gun will function. So if you are going to run a semi-auto, there's a pretty good chance it will not function with super light 115 grain ammo and super powerful plus P ammunition. You're gonna have some short strokes, you're gonna have some problems, you're gonna have some misfeeds. You can put any power of ammo in a revolver because you mechanically turn the cylinder yourself. That allows you to use any diameter of ammunition that you like as long as it fits inside the cylinder. That's why with every 357 revolver you can also use lighter weight 38 special. So you can use those big heavy 357 Magnum or 357 Magnum plus P if your revolver is rated for that, and then you can also dumb it down for target practice or potentially teaching a new shooter, which is very nice. Another facet in which that can be useful is in an ammo shortage, which we've been running into a lot lately, where you might go to the store and you might be able to find 40, but you might not be able to find 9, right? Well, what if you went to the store and there wasn't 357, but there was 38 and 38 plus P? Well, with this gun, you can use that. Or if you went to the same store the next week and they didn't have 38 plus P, but they did have 357, you can use that. So especially in modern times, like with shortages and things like that, these guns come even more useful. Now, another cool thing about these old guys is that they can be purchased and carried in every state. Now, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not even gonna pretend to be one on TV, but I can tell you that there are a lot of restrictions when it comes to semi-automatic pistols, specifically magazine size and features, and those are not usually covered with a revolver because the revolver usually has anywhere between a 5-shot magazine capacity, generally, sometimes a 6, sometimes a 7, as you can see there, and occasionally you can get 8 or even 10-shot revolvers, but all of those are generally California/Colorado compliant, so you can get and carry these in a lot of states that you otherwise couldn't get a semi-automatic pistol, which makes them more available, and I can promise you again, they are just as useful if you know how to use them. Now, another thing I really like about revolvers is they help you become a better marksman. And the reason for that is because they're easier and more effective to dry fire practice with, in my personal opinion. If you're unfamiliar with pistols or the concept of dry fire practice, it is simply practicing with your firearm without using any ammunition in the safety of either your home or a place where it's safe to point a firearm. So you can take this GP 100 here and you can just point it at a light switch where there's nothing behind it, by the way, with no ammunition in the gun or anywhere around you. You could point it at that light switch, watch those sights, pull the trigger slowly to the rear, see if you've disturbed the sights at all, and if you haven't, theoretically you've hit the target, right? Now with a semi-automatic, you'd have to rack the slide and get back into action. But with a revolver, just pull the trigger, let the trigger out, pull the trigger again, let the trigger out, pull the trigger again. See where I'm going with this. you can essentially practice your marksmanship an infinite amount of times without having to worry about getting a dry fire trainer or mantis or anything like that. The first person to actually hit me with this concept was my buddy Max years ago when he was training to be a police officer. He was like, I think I'm gonna get a double action 22 pistol. And I was like, why the hell would you get that? He's like, well, I need to, make my marksmanship quota and all that. So I was like, okay, how is that gonna help you? He's like, well, it's pretty easy. You can just sit there and point at whatever you want and dry fire practice. And I was like, oh my God, you're onto something there, sir. So ever since then, I've kept a double action pistol in my collection just for that specific purpose alone. And for the last reason, I do want to quote one of my favorite trainers, Clint Smith. You might not actually be using your gun in a defensive situation. And what I mean by that is if you follow Active Self-Protection or any of the awesome YouTube channels that do self-defense tutorials, you'll find that there's a lot of people picking up guns on the ground when it comes to real defensive situations. You might be using the guy's gun that tried to rob you. You might be using the first guy who tried to stop the bank robber's gun after he gets ventilated. There's a lot of situations where you might end up using a revolver because they're a very common platform that you might not expect. I mean, heck, you might be at a work retreat someday where you guys go to a range, you just don't want to look stupid. There's a lot of reasons to actually learn how to use a revolver in real life other than defensive use. I mean, heck, you might just think they look cool. But the reality is it's good to know every platform when it comes to firearms. It's good to have a base education in revolvers, AKs, AR-15s, and a couple of the most popular semi-automatic pistols because they do have a couple of different niches and features that you might like or not like or might have to use someday. So you don't want to be the time when you have to pick up a revolver for a self-defense scenario be the first time that you picked up a revolver because the trigger is a little bit different. Operating the action is a little bit different. So it's good to know lots of platforms and it's good to be informed in lots of different topics. Hell, you might pick up a revolver for the first time and realize you're a revolver person, you're going to shoot them the rest of your life and you're the next Jerry Michalak. Those aren't all of the reasons to own a revolver, but those are some of the few that I think are very important and I think are some of the pros versus a semi-automatic pistol. Now, if you guys have any reasons that you like revolvers that I haven't listed, by all means, put them down in the comment section below. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Please help out your local homeless shelters and remember to recycle. I'll check you later.